Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me for today's webinar. My name is Amber Hines, and I'm the owner of Ashper. We specialize in Medicaid compliant annuities from A-rated insurance carriers. And today we're going to be talking about Medicaid mistakes and practice tips for a Medicaid attorney. We're really excited because we have attorney Todd Watley with us to present today's webinar as well as our webinar next month. And if you have any questions during today's webinar, feel free to type those into the questions bar of the GoToWebinar task board. And then also, if you are interested in a copy of the handouts from today's program, you can download those from the GoToWebinar dashboard as well. And Todd, if you want to advance the slides, I'll just tell people a little bit about Ashper before I introduce you.
Go.
Perfect. So at Ashper, we offer complimentary case analysis. We will help you to determine the optimal amount to have your clients purchase an annuity for, the term of the annuity, and which assets your clients may consider annuitizing. We can help you to annuitize retirement accounts or existing non-qualified annuities or life insurance contracts through a 1035 exchange. We offer assistance from the beginning to the end of a case. If you have questions related to quotes or complimentary case analysis, we would help with that, as well as if you have a client that would predecease the term of the annuity, we assist with the death claim process as well. Like I mentioned, we work with A-rated insurance carriers and we offer top-notch customer service. And again, I'm super excited that attorney Todd Watley is with us today. He's done thousands of Medicaid applications. He's done over 20 Medicaid appeals, and he has coached dozens of elder law attorneys. And with that, I'll turn everything over to Todd.
Hey, thanks, Amber. Yeah, thanks for having me today. This is one of those topics I've actually never done this presentation on, and it came about because of the coaching and people have problems, make mistakes. And I just started thinking back to when I started, and I started doing this back in 2000, and I had no one to go to. I had no one to turn to. And it's funny because I would mess up sometimes. I'm like, oh, I'm the only person who's ever done this. And I would just feel ashamed and didn't feel comfortable calling people. And I was just, and it's funny because once you do start talking with people, and I go to national conferences and I bring up, I know someone who made this mistake. They're like, oh yeah, I've made that mistake too. It's like, oh, so I'm not the only one. So I want to talk about this just because, having done this for over 20 years, I've probably done 5,000 Medicaid applications over the years. And so I've probably made every one of these things that I talk about, I've probably done. Okay. So don't be ashamed. Just know it happens and we can get through it. So I'm going to assume, if you've come to Amber's presentations probably more than just a few times, you probably know a lot of the Medicaid basics. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you pretty much understand. I will go into some detail, but don't leave. Just stay with me. Let's get through this. But if you're not real good about the basics of Medicaid, you probably want to go watch those videos and then come back and see this later on. But don't leave, okay? I will give a quick review. Probably the first and foremost mistake that people do as elder law attorneys is take your client's word. You would think that they know what they have. You would think they know their assets and they know stuff. They probably do, but remember good old Ronald Reagan from a long time ago, trust but verify. So take what your client tells you, write it down and say, okay, I'm going to assume this is correct for now, but I need you to verify this. I need bank statements, I need deeds, and do your own research if you can, particularly for real estate. And I'll go through that more in just a second. But probably the first and foremost mistake is taking your client's word for it and them not fully understanding, or they miss something. Okay. So it's a good start, but you must have documentation to back it up. And we always give our clients a Medicaid checklist. It's a list of all of the documents they will need. We give it to them as early as possible, even before they hire us sometimes, to get this information and bring it in to us, because we must verify. DHS, Medicaid's going to require verification anyway, but it's good for us to see exactly what the client has. Okay. So let's talk about mistakes made with assets. As you know, the applicant has to be under $2,000. And so this applies to countable assets. The countable assets must be under $2,000. What are non-countable assets? Well, that list is much shorter than the non-countable or the countable. So non-countable assets are your home, pretty much regardless of values. States do have different values. It's 603 or way above there, but that's generally not a problem. What I say is anything that's in this house, in the attic, the garage, whatever, household furnishings do not count. One vehicle does not count, and you can typically pick and choose the most expensive vehicle, and a irrevocable prepaid burial plan. Those are the four things that pretty much in every state count or do not count regardless of value. And then in some states, the IRA of either spouse, sometimes both spouses. So check your state rules on that, but sometimes the IRA does not count. Okay. So we have to get under $2,000 of countable assets. And one of those countable assets is the cash value on life insurance. So you have to, and your client probably, I would say probably half the time they know if there's a cash value to it, but typically they'll say, I have life insurance. And you're like, okay, is it term or whole or universal? They're like, I don't know, it's life insurance. Well, this is where you've got to get documentation from them, and you have to get the current cash value, because that is a countable asset. And many times it changes over time. And so you have to get documentation from the insurance company itself to say, today or very close to today, what is the cash value? So please understand, term life insurance has no cash value. So if they're paying a low premium and it expires after 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, that is typically a term life insurance policy, and it has no cash value. Also, just as a practice point, many times the life insurance that an employer gives an employee at retirement is almost always term life insurance. There is no cash value to it. It's just at death, this much money goes to the beneficiaries. And so they can keep term life insurance. That is not a countable resource because it only pays at death. You can't convert it into cash. The two policies that typically do have some cash value is a whole life policy and a universal life policy. There is a death benefit, so that's typically the bigger number, 100,000, 200,000, a million, whatever. But then there is cash value, and many times the big number is the death benefit. The smaller number is cash value. So if the cash value of all life insurance policies are over $1,500 total, then the applicant is over-resourced, that the amount in those cash value life policies are a countable resource. Check your state rules, but typically if all of your cash value is under 1,500, so it's just a very small policy. If it's under 1,500, typically they will say that's fine, you can keep that. But if it's over 1,500, you have to look at it as a countable resource. And if you think the parents don't know what they have, the kids really don't know. And so this is one thing that I tell families, this is a huge mistake. This is a time bomb or a landmine waiting on us out there, because we have to find this, because the state can find it. And if you find it later on and say, oh, they have a $3,000 cash value policy, they're disqualified, and they've always been disqualified. That was always a countable resource, and therefore it's a problem. So now what to do with this policy? Once you find it and there's cash value, what do you do with it? You have to look at both the cash value and the death benefit. If those two numbers are very close, and typically what I see is sometimes there's a $20,000, $25,000 death benefit, but it has, say it's a $25,000 death benefit, but it's a $20,000 cash value. So with that $5,000 difference, it's yes, they will lose $5,000 if they cash it in and get the $20,000. The kids won't get $25,000 when they die. So generally, if it's close like that, my recommendation is just call the company, cash it in, get the money, and let's do something with it, rather than assigning it to the kids. But if you look at it, and if the cash value is low, but the death benefit is high, let's say it's a $200,000 death benefit, but the cash value is like $20,000. Well, if you cash it in, you're just going to get $20,000 today. But if you hang on to it until this person dies, the kids get $200,000. So in that situation where there's a big difference between the two, the kids may want to buy that policy. So therefore they put $20,000 into mom and dad's bank account. You then assign this policy to the kids, let them make the payments every month until mom and dad pass away and they get $200,000. So don't just think just because there's cash value, you need to cash it in. Sometimes if it's a big difference, the kids will do much better and they will want to keep this policy, but it can't stay in the applicant's name. You've got to transfer it, okay? Now, be very careful. And this is the one change I just did to this slide just prior to starting this presentation. And so this will not be in what you download. So please make a note. There are some Medicaid planning techniques out there that will say, hey, you can take this life insurance policy with a big cash value and convert it into a different life insurance policy that now has a very low cash value. So you can take those cash value premiums or the amount and turn it into a payment for a policy with a big death benefit and no cash value. That sounds great on paper, but I've discussed this with Amber and she says that is not a good idea, that typically most states will see this as a gift for or a transfer for less than fair market value. I did it once and that's exactly what the state did. They're like, wait a second, you took $50,000 worth of cash value, turned it into $1 million policy with only $1,000 cash value. So we were under that $1,500, but they viewed that as, wait, you just gave up $50,000 for a lot of money later on. That's a gift. You're denied. And so I was like, oh, shoot. So we undid it, bought something else, and just did something with the money. So be careful. There are some techniques out there, and particularly insurance salespeople out there that will say, hey, take this huge cash value, convert it into a low cash value and a bigger death benefit. Don't do it, okay? All right, real estate. Again, the applicant and their spouse probably know what they have out there, but sometimes they forget. I've had clients with a lot of pieces that they got from families and different things, and it's a problem. I've got a case right now that I'm working on. I was on the phone with DHS yesterday. I'm working with the daughter, and her mom has had like 6 siblings, and her mom bought her siblings' interest in this property, and she owns like 5 or 6 different pieces, and it's just been a nightmare trying to figure this out. But I think we did. We did our own research to make sure in the counties where this person has other real estate, we've looked, and I think we found it all. The owners sometimes forget, but their children are sometimes clueless. And so you've got to do some research, go through mom and dad's files, do the county search, do what you can to look, because any real estate that is not their home is a countable asset and will cause problems. Okay. So practice tip is run a real estate search for the counties where they live and nearby counties for sure. And then if they think like, I'm in Northwest Arkansas and this person owns real estate down in South Arkansas. And so we had to go through all the counties to see, did their name pop up as owners of real estate down in those counties? Because trust me, DHS will find it and they will cause you problems. They should get a tax bill for every piece of real estate that they own. They should get a tax bill at least once a year. So many times you can go through mom and dad's old mail or whatever and find it there, but look for a tax bill. Bank accounts and investment accounts sometimes get missed. Again, people forget these, and particularly if you're dealing with someone with dementia, they're not going to know what they have. And so you've got to figure this out. Remember, jointly owned accounts with the applicant's name on it, even when it's not their money, will need to be accounted for. So many times, I've always seen it typically with the grown adult son who is not married and will put mom or dad's name on their bank account simply for convenience. Well, if the applicant's name is on that bank account, that is a countable asset. Okay, you have to take that into account. Now, what you do is when you find that mom put no money in this account, she doesn't claim it to be hers, it's just her name is on this account, you have to prove to DHS that her name is in there for convenience, not as an owner. They will want to look at the deposits. Where did those deposits come from? Hopefully you can show the money going into this account only came from the son. You can see it's from his employer. It's his money. It goes in there. It's not mom's money. So as I always tell clients, you're guilty until proven innocent here. If her name is on the account, it's deemed to be hers unless you can prove otherwise, and you prove otherwise by showing deposits. Okay, that this is not mom's money going into this. Her name was simply there for convenience. Typically, investment accounts come through monthly, at least quarterly, almost always. And so you have to go through their mail or their email. If they were a little techie, they've probably done paperless notifications. And so it comes in their email. So just go through and look for bank accounts or anything to find those accounts. You have to show them. And I promise you, if you don't find it, the state can. I've had, particularly over the last 3 to 4 years, DHS has gotten very savvy to say, hey, Todd, your client has this account with $3,500 in it. And I'm like, oh, the kids missed it. You just can't find it. And so they have some, as I always say, they're the government, they can find stuff. And so they will find stuff, and you need to look hard. Thankfully, I think here we go. So what if you find this account or they find this account later on? You're well into the application, you're trying to get her qualified, and you're 3, 4, 6 months into this application, and you hope that they were Medicaid qualified 6 months ago, and now DHS finds this account with $3,500 in it. Well, that throws them over the limit. I have found DHS to be pretty forgiving in situations where a child misses the bank account. Okay. So this goes to your reputation to always be honest with DHS. Sometimes clients will want you to push the edges and fudge or whatever. I won't do it because I'm going to do another Medicaid application after this client's, and I don't want my reputation to be one of Todd Hyde's assets. And so with that reputation, if DHS comes back, or even we find this bank account, something came in the mail 6 months later, and it's like, oh no, here's this bank account. I have found DHS to be pretty forgiving to say, hey, We just found this. It's got $3,500 in it. We're going to spend it on the nursing home this month. Please don't go back 6 months and say, oh, she's just qualified those entire 6 months. So you're disqualified to start all over again. And now the family owes for 6 months worth of nursing home bills. That's horrendous. And I've had that happen. I took it to a fair hearing and said, look, this isn't fair. We did everything we could. We submitted everything. We did not know about this. And to now penalize this family for $60,000 for 6 months worth of nursing home, over $3,500, that's just not fair. And so the hearing officer has been pretty forgiving. And like I said, the DHS caseworker, if you're upfront and if you're a stand-up person to say, I tell you everything, and we truly just now found this, generally they will be pretty forgiving. But if they don't, appeal it, argue hardship to say, look, you're going to penalize this family $60,000 over a $3,500 bill. That's a hardship. Please be nice to us. Okay. All right. More assets. So improper snapshot date. The snapshot is typically the first day of 30 days in a long-term care facility. So that's the day you look at the assets. Snapshots only occur with married couples. Okay. So with a married couple, on the date that the spouse goes into the nursing home, or it can be the date of application if you have waiver programs. You do the application knowing that you're going to be denied, but it's the purpose of the initial application is to say, we have X number of dollars, and now we're going to spend half of those dollars to get them qualified. The issue is sometimes you can miss that. Okay. Sometimes if you don't calculate the money correctly on this date, or there could be multiple dates that could be a snapshot date and you don't pick the right one, you could underspend and think you're qualified, but you're still over-resourced because you did not spend enough. And you can overspend sometimes because you could have picked one later previously and they're already qualified. You did not have to spend anything. I've got 2 examples on this. So let's look at those real quick. So let's say here, this is where we underspend. So we think that there is $200,000 on the snapshot date. With $200,000, each spouse gets half. So the community spouse gets 100, the institutionalized spouse gets 100. So to get, we'll say him qualified, we need to spend $98,000. That gets him down to 2. Now we're qualified and he gets on Medicaid. What if there was actually $220,000? We missed $20,000 out there. So now with 220, each spouse gets 110. All right. So he actually had 110. He needed to spend 108, but we only spent 98. We think they're qualified because we spent 98 thinking we were on the left, but we were actually on the right. And so now we come up and we've spent $12,000 or $10,000 less than we should have, and they're still qualified. And so with $10,000, if this was 5 or 6 months down the road, the family owes that whole time because we were never qualified. So my practice tip here is always spend a little bit more, but absolutely make sure that you know how much money they have on the snapshot date. So be at the 220, not the 200, and no, I've got to spend $108,000 rather than 98. Okay. And if there's questions on that, I'll address that later. So let's talk about overspending. This is where you can look like a hero to a family. So let's say that today he goes into the nursing home and they have $100,000. And this second stroke puts him into the nursing home permanently. So they come in to see you. They say, we have $100,000. Each spouse gets to keep 50. All right. So we spend his $48,000. We spend it on your fee, spend it on the house, the car, whatever. burial, we get his $48,000 spent. And so now they're at her 50 plus his 52,000, and he now qualifies. Okay. However, you missed something. 9 months ago, he had his first stroke and he spent 45 days in a nursing home then. And then 45 days or 9 months ago, they had $200,000. Okay. Well, if you do the snapshot 9 months ago with 200,000, just like my previous example, each spouse gets 100,000. They spent $40,000 9 months ago or 8 months ago updating the house, and they bought a $60,000 van to help him get around. He did come home after those 45 days, and he was doing okay since they updated the house and bought him a van. So using this snapshot date with 100 and 100, they spent his $100,000 on the house and the van. And now today, with only $100,000, they're qualified. He's qualified because he spent his $100,000 previously. So you can pick and choose which snapshot date you want to use. And so if you go back to 9 months ago and say, hey, DHS, he was in a nursing home 45 days, that meets our 30-day requirement. We're picking that snapshot date. They had 200,000, they spent 100, he's qualified. We don't need to spend a dime. And when you do that, you are a superhero to your clients because they think, oh, we have 100,000. I'm sure the nursing home told them, you've got to spend 48,000. DHS tells them, yeah, with 100,000, you've got to spend 48,000. They come to you, you know what you're doing. You look at this and say, you don't need to spend 48,000. You've already spent his half because we can go back 9 months ago. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, we'll address it in the questions. So let's look at income. If you're in an income cap state, you should know that. Then if your income is over the cap, you have to do a Miller Trust. And one of the beginning mistakes that I see people make is they don't look at gross income. They look at the bank statement that says, oh, Social Security, they get $2,000 a month. Well, they don't get $2,000 a month. When it starts at Social Security, their payment is actually higher than that. It includes their Medicare premium that they pay. So you have to look at the gross income, not the net. What hits their bank account is the net. And particularly if they're getting a pension payment from an employer that says, hey, they get $500 a month from this employer, you have to get a statement from the place that they're getting this money from to see, are they making their Medicare premium payment? Are they making tax payments? Because the income that you have to base your Miller Trust amount on, do I need a Miller Trust or not, is gross income, not net. So don't look at what hits their bank account, look at where the money comes from. So people will say, oh, my income is $2,000 a month. Well, that's what hits their bank account. That's not their gross income. You've got to figure that out. And if you needed a Miller Trust but didn't do it, you're in trouble, okay? So every month that you needed this Miller Trust and didn't have it is a month that someone, you, since you missed it, or your liability insurance company has to pay for, okay? Trust me, I've written that check and it hurts, okay? So don't mess up. All right. Not a common mistake. Thankfully, Arkansas was very restrictive. They said that all money, all income had to go into the Miller Trust. And if a dollar did not go in, we were disqualified, which was ridiculous. We've now gotten that fixed. Collier Moore, thankfully, and an associate of mine got that fixed. And so now we just have to make sure they're under the limit by putting enough money into the Miller Trust to do that. But be careful of how the family spends money from the Miller Trust. I had a case one time where I thought everything was fine and the the guy was paying for his gas out of mom's Miller Trust because I was going to see mom. And so therefore I thought mom's income could pay for my gas. I was like, no. And he got denied. Not my fault, thank goodness. Okay. Practice practice tip. Put the Miller Trust information in writing. Do a letter to say, you need a Miller Trust. Here's how this works, and have the client sign it. I have what I call a CYA letter on that. If you want a copy of it, please let me know. Okay. Email me, Todd at theyoderlawcoach.com, and say, hey, Todd, give me your Miller Trust cover letter, and I will shoot that over to you. That letter has saved me. So the guy with the gas, okay, the letter said you can only spend money on what DHS tells you you can spend money on and nothing else. And thankfully, I had that letter. He signed it, and I could say, I told you. He's like, yeah, you did. So that saved me. And it has saved me on a lot of other cases. You have to have the CYA letter. All right, notices. Once you apply, Medicaid will look at your stuff and then say, hey, we're missing this and this and this. Our state, and I'm not sure if every state does it, but we have 10 days. Once DHS gets the application, they will look at it and say, hey, we need this month's bank statement or this, whatever, and we need it within 10 days. Well, that 10 days is sometimes kind of stressful by the time the notice gets to us and we get it to the client and they have to go look for it. And so you definitely don't want to miss a notice. Now, one way to make that as minimal as possible is when you do an application, I really encourage attorneys and my staff, let's send in what I call a fully developed claim. That's actually a VA term. You can do a fully developed VA claim, which means you send in all the paperwork supporting everything that you claim. Do that with Medicaid also. Get every piece of information that you can in so that you can send it in with them, and it cuts down on those notices. Now, the only exception to that, when I will send in what I call a naked claim, is just, hey, here's the app so we can start this date. Sometimes a couple will come to you when they've spent too much money based on that previous snapshot date, and they have spent more than half. So let's go back to that previous example of overspending. 9 months ago, he had a stroke. What if they had spent $120,000 or $130,000 and were paying for the nursing home, and so they have overpaid? Well, since we can prove they were qualified before, we can do an application and DHS should go back 3 months. And so a family can come in to see you thinking, oh, let's get on Medicaid today. Well, actually, I can get you on Medicaid 3 months ago. It's imperative you can only go 3 months prior to the application. And so that application needs to go in ASAP. So in those situations where I can tell this family has overpaid and we need to stop the bleeding, I will do an application that day. Go online or fill out the paperwork, however you do the application, do it immediately so that you can have that date. That's a naked application. You now have to get all this information in, hopefully within 10 days. So almost always send in a fully developed claim, but so that it will decrease the amount of notices, but there are a very few situations where you can send in a naked app. Okay. DHS wants their information typically within 10 days. This is serious. If you miss a deadline, it's your fault, okay? And they will get denied, and someone owes the nursing home all the way back to the start date, and that can get very, very expensive. Create a workflow for these. Make sure someone in your office, let's do the practice tip, if DHS will email those to you, we finally have gotten them to email it the day that they do it. So we get it on day one. We actually have 10 days, but there were times back in the past when they would mail it to us and we would get it 5 days into this 10 days. We would only have 5 days to get stuff, which seems like it's not fair, but it's DHS. Okay. So now we get them to email it to us. And I would tell your clients up front before we do this is serious, and have it in your contract for services to say, once we apply and we get a notice back, we only have 10 days. So when we will tell you as soon as possible, and tell you when this is due. And if you don't get us information back, you're going to be denied, and it's not our fault. Okay. So no, this is very serious. When we ask you for stuff, don't say, I'll get around to it. No, you go to the bank, you do what you can do to get that information, but put that in your contract so that, again, it has saved us, because they drug their feet and got denied. And they're like, why did you mess up? I'm like, I didn't mess up. I told you about it. And in this contract, I said, this is serious and you have 10 days. You drag your feet. This is your fault, not mine. Okay. So have someone in your office that is responsible for this. Check the mail every day. If it is mailed to you, you've got to jump on this quickly, because there is a deadline. And if you miss it, it's a problem. All right, I love this one. The other mistake is you don't know the rules very well. There is no reason. This is policy. It is out there. You can find it. You can read it. All right. I've been told, I can't find out exactly. They won't tell me, but the caseworkers, they get training when they start this job, but it's not much. Okay. It's surprisingly little. And so, you can know the rules better than them. Now, one thing that's interesting, as an attorney, you may or may not intimidate them. If they've been doing this a while, they've probably worked with enough attorneys who didn't know what they were doing. And they're like, oh, you're a lawyer, but I know this better than you, so I can, do whatever. You should not be one of those lawyers. You should know your stuff. And you can know this very well and do a good job, but you must know the rules better than them. All right, here's my nerd alert for the day. You're going to think differently of me once I tell you this, but I'm telling you, this is how you get good at this. Read the policy start to finish. Pull it up and start at the first policy. Read it through 5 times. I know that's super nerdy, but I did it in January. We tended to be slow in January. Whenever your slow time is, or just make it a point, you've got to read through this start to finish. And I did it once a year for 5 years. Print it, do it in a PDF or something so that you can highlight and make notes, because when you read it the first time, you're like, oh, okay, well, this is good to know. As you practice that year, you're going to have cases that deal with certain policy issues. The next year, when you read it, you're going to read this policy and think, oh yeah, that was the Applegate case and blah, blah, blah. It means more to you once you've done a case involving that. And that policy will mean more to you once you've done a case on it. And you can make notes on that, and you will learn stuff every single year. So I highly encourage you, go through it 5 times. Okay. I did it 5 years in a row. I know, nerd, but I know it. And caseworkers know that I know it. And they know when Todd Watley sends in an app, be careful, because he knows the rules. How do I know that? I did a FOIA request for my local DHS one year for every piece of document, interoffice between caseworkers or DHS staff involving me. And I got a stack of stuff, and they said, Todd Watley knows his stuff. And I was like, okay. Practice tips. Hire a Medicaid case manager ASAP. Doing the work of processing the application is not attorney work. Yes, you can do it. You should do it a time or two, but you're going to find that you should only be doing what only you can do. As an attorney, only do what only you can do. Doing the application is not it. You can train someone to do it. The other good reason for having someone else in your office deal with the caseworker, we have purposely set up a good cop, bad cop scenario, which means the case manager in your office should be the DHS caseworker's friend. Okay. She should, hey, as they're discussing, talk about personal stuff sometimes. Find out where their kids play baseball. Do they have a baseball tournament this weekend? Just find out as much as you can and be their friend, and that will help you later on. But then when that caseworker who's their friend gets hung up on something to say, I don't think you can do this, when I know the rules and I say, yes, we can, but the DHS caseworker says, I don't think you can do that. Your case manager's like, look, Todd knows his stuff, but do I need to get Todd on the phone? And Todd's the bad guy. Okay. When I get on the phone with them, I'm stern, I'm gruff because I know the rules. I do it. You make it so that that caseworker doesn't want to talk to you. If they maintain that stance and they say, I don't think you can do this. And for example, in my Tulsa office, we had a caseworker who just simply would not let the IRA annuity of the institutionalized spouse go to the community spouse. Amber advised us on it. She told us what to do. She did it absolutely correctly. And this caseworker was like, I just don't think that's right. I don't think you can take his IRA and give it to her. I'm like, yeah, the policy says you can. She said, well, I don't think so. I said, fine. So our case manager did all that. We got into the fair hearing and I was not nice to her. I was very firm. I was like, here's the rules. Here's what this says. What's the problem? She said, well, I just don't think you should be able to do that. That was literally her defense. The judge was like, the rules say they can do this. This applies. And I was not nice to her because she forced us into a fair hearing. And so now when that caseworker gets a case from us, she knows I need to give them some leeway, and they really do know what they're talking about. And she definitely doesn't want to do another fair hearing with me. So that's the good cop, bad cop. Hire a case manager in your office as soon as you think you can afford it and let them do that. It will make your life a whole lot easier. Now, it may seem fun or whatever to say, fine, let's just do a fair hearing. Try your best to work it out. Don't do frivolous fair hearings, because once you get known for doing fair hearings that really didn't need to be done, you lose credibility and you lose that force of saying, I'm going to take this to a fair hearing. You know I'm right, and I'm not going to be nice to you. Next month's webinar is going to be on fair hearings, and I will talk about that more in detail next month. But it is something, I've seen attorneys just say, fine, let's just do a fair hearing. No, don't do that. Okay. Try your best to work it out. Talk to the attorneys at the state, work with them. They don't want to do a fair hearing any more than you do. It's time out of their day. They're busy. So try to work it out if possible. But if you do a fair hearing, make it so that everyone there doesn't want to do this again. Okay. I think I'm super nice. I think Amber will back me up on this. I love people. I love what I do. And I'm generally a really nice guy. But if you force me to take time out of my day to do a fair hearing, I'm not going to be nice to you. And I'm going to make it so that you don't want to do this again. All right. I mentioned this before, but one of the best practice tips is give a new client the document checklist. This is a great tool. Again, if you don't have this, my list may be different than yours, but at least I can get you started. Email me, todd@theyoderlawcoach.com, and I will send you over my document checklist so that you can at least have a starting point to say, hey, we need this. It's the real purpose of it is to let the client know what you need to get, what they need to get, so we can do this application. It's also a great marketing tool. So if someone comes in and they're just kind of kicking tires and like, I don't know if I want to do this, or even at public events, someone seems very interested in, well, do I really need to hire you to do my Medicaid application or not? Once you give them this checklist of things they need to get and verify, then they're like, oh, I probably do need to hire you. So rather than just saying, yeah, you really do need to hire me, give them this document checklist. They'll go through it and say, good Lord, this is a bunch of stuff. Yeah, it is. That's why you need to hire me. And again, for a prospect in your office, I will give them this. If they don't hire me, fine. I've helped them know what they need to get. But once they go back home and look at it, they're like, oh, man, we need an attorney to do this. So it is great for pre-planning if the person's not in the nursing home yet, but they're just like thinking about it. This is a great pre-planning tool to let the client have your information, your name and address and phone numbers on here, so that when the time comes that they do need Medicaid, they have this form and they can call you and set up the appointment to actually do the application. And it will save your staff a ton of time, okay? Rather than the client calling, hey, do I need this? Do I need this? Look at your list. I gave you a list. Go through the list. Yes, I need everything on this list. All right. It's sad that I have to say this, but I do say it because it will be tempting, okay? It will be tempting to cheat. Clients were like, do we really have to tell them about this? Do we really? It's like, yes, you do. So how I explain this away is, you're not my last Medicaid client, okay? I have been doing this for X number of years. My reputation is good, and I want it to remain good because I'm going to do Medicaid clients after you. And if I cheat on your case and I get a bad reputation, that's not good for any of us. It's not good for me. It's not good for my clients. And so, no, I am not going to cheat. If you know the rules, I think that's my next. Yeah, use the rules, okay? Since you've read the rules 5 times now, you know the rules, and we can use these rules to do some tremendous things for folks. We can say, for a married couple, we can save hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably close to $1 million. Get Amber to work with you. Let me help you. And we can work with clients with $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. And with the use of spend down and annuities, we can protect all of that. We don't have to cheat. We don't have to hide anything. We can do good work using the rules. Okay. Again, with cheating, if DHS messes up in your favor, I highly encourage you to let them know it, okay? This builds huge brownie points with you to say, hey, caseworker, I think you kind of messed up here. And they're like, oh my goodness, I did. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So it's not that you're sabotaging your client's case. I have let mistakes go thinking, oh, okay, I'll just let that go, only to have this case come up in review 2 or 3 months later when a supervisor pulls files to just make sure that their caseworkers are doing a good job, and they find this mistake and now come back to you and say, yeah, this is a problem. You should have never been on Medicaid. So now we're months down the road when the family thinks everything's great. This mistake in your favor, they're going to rectify, and it's a problem. So just address it up front and say, hey, you messed up. If you tell them and they still don't fix it, I think you're fine. Get that in writing through email or letter or something to say, hey, I told them, they didn't fix it. Not my problem. Yeah, we can fix it today, but don't go back to application date because we told them they messed up and they chose not to do anything about it. Yes, we'll fix it today going forward, but don't go backwards on us. All right. All right. So those are the most common mistakes. I just want to say real quick, I do coaching. I am, quote, semi-retired. I see clients on Tuesday and Thursday. I still have a very active practice. I still see clients, still do applications every day. But what I love to do now is teach people to do what I do and to get really good at what they do. I've been doing this for 23 years. I have my CELA designation. I have an LLM in elder law. I love this stuff, and I want more people to do it and help people get through things that they're going through. I learned this the very hard way, okay? I started doing this back in 2000 when NALA wasn't as big as it is now, not as helpful. I had no mentors around me. The only other attorney in the state doing it did not want to help me. He would not answer questions. I learned this the very hard way, and it probably took me 5 years of reading those policies and doing cases to get proficient. I think I can do this. I know I can. I can get you from knowing nothing to being a very proficient elder law attorney within 1 year. Okay. I've done the training. We have video trainings. We do video training and phone calls and group phone calls. And I work with you intently for a year to get you from wherever you are today to being very proficient, being able to meet with clients, get the facts, figure out the facts, apply the facts. We do at least 2 hours of phone calls every single month with the training. That's in addition to the training. I will do meetings with you, and I say 2 hours, it's at least 2 hours. If you need more time at this point, I can probably give you more time than that. A coaching client just signed up and had 2 denials his first month. A previous attorney that he fired, he got 2 denials. I probably spent 4 to 6 hours with him that month getting through these denials, fixing the problems. Thankfully, we were able to fix it. So I would love to work with you. If you're interested in coaching, please give us a call. Let's just talk, see where you are, see what I can do for you. Okay. All right, Amber, I'm ready for questions.
Okay, perfect. So we have a handful of questions here. Somebody is asking, can you explain again what you have to do to get 3 months of benefits prior to the date of application?
Okay. So when you meet with someone, you can look back and see they were actually qualified. They were under the resource limit. And that almost always happens. Well, it pretty much always happens with a married case. You do a correct snapshot date back in the past, and you see that they have spent more than their half or the institutionalized spouse's share. They've spent more than that. You can actually go back up to 3 months and apply today, but say, hey, Medicaid, we're going to prove to you that they were qualified actually 3 months ago, and DHS will actually go back and pay for those months. And many times, if they have paid for those 3 months out of their pocket and shouldn't have, they will actually get a refund. And man, that's the best meeting in the world, is like, hey, I'm going to charge you $10,000 or $15,000 to do this, but since I can show we can go back 3 months, you'll get a $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 refund from the nursing home. So it's just basically being able to prove 3 months ago they had spent enough money to be qualified.
Okay, perfect. And then somebody is asking, what's the title of the policy that you're referring to reading through? I'm assuming you're referring to your state Medicaid manual. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, your state policy should be out there somewhere. I have found it's sometimes difficult to find, but it's out there on the internet. Get it and just read through it, start to finish.
Okay. And then this is kind of a long, specific question, but it says all accounts prior to Medicaid application are jointly owned. Community spouse withdraws cash from joint accounts because he or she is afraid of the fiscal responsibility of our monetary system. Then the application is made with the institutionalized spouse retaining only the amount in his or her checking that's under the maximum allowed. The cash withdrawn by the community spouse from joint account prior to the date of application is also under the amount that the community spouse can retain while having the other spouse on Medicaid. Whose money is the cash that the community spouse withdraws? Is this joint from before the withdrawal or after the withdrawal that the joint ownership is retained?
Wow. Okay. So what's interesting is Medicaid, when you apply for Medicaid or looking at the snapshot date for a married couple, they don't care whose name is on what. If they're married and it's owned by either spouse, they're going to look at it. Okay. Which sounds bad, particularly if they've only been married for like 6 months. They will look at everything owned by either spouse. But the good news is then we can do that split, the 200 into 100, 100, and that's basically just on paper, okay? Medicaid really doesn't care whose name is on it at the time of application. They just want to see 200 is now down to the community spouse's 100 plus the 2,000 from this person. Once you get under that 102 in total assets, they don't care whose name is on it, they will now qualify. Now, you then generally have 1 year from that date to get the institutionalized spouse's name off of those assets. So if you did get qualified with the institutionalized spouse, having more than $2,000, that's okay as long as you were under the total, but you've got to get that transferred over. So pulling out cash really doesn't matter if the facts that you said with the cash and the money in the accounts is still under those limits, you're fine. And the cash is basically whoever's holding it, but you should have reported on the application that you do have this cash in the possession of the community spouse, and that's fine. They don't care. They're just looking at big numbers, and then a year from now they will look at what cash or what assets does the institutionalized spouse have, and that has to be under $2,000 a year later.
Okay, there's a question here about, have you ever had a scenario where Medicaid never issued written documentation? Client went into a nursing home in January and was eligible. I responded to requests for information and never heard back. Many phone calls later learned something was entered into the system, but it was never mailed to me. Medicaid required resubmission.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's happened. So without a official denial, the case is still open. Or if they claim that they sent you something, make them prove it. Make them show, how can you prove that I got this? And they can't. And so therefore they should reopen it. I would ask for a fair hearing immediately. That's one of those issues where you can appeal that and submit to the judge, say, judge or administrative officer, I never got the paperwork, and they can't prove they did. So therefore, many times the caseworker is kind of like, well, I sent it and I can't open it up because on my end it's been denied. Many times the hearing officer is the only person that can say this case is hereby reopened and forces them to do it. It seems kind of stupid, but I've had to do fair hearings, and the case manager she was on our side to say, hey, Todd, I can't reopen this because on my end it's denied. I need, for some reason, I need the hearing officer to issue an order to reopen this case for me to reopen it. And I was like, okay, so let's do a fair hearing. It was a very friendly, fair hearing to say, I never got it. You can't prove I got it. And so therefore you need to reopen this case.
Okay,
So yeah,
we have a question here, and maybe you'll cover this next month, but
okay.
what amount do you believe is a fair average fee amount as a flat fee for handling a Medicaid application, knowing each case is unique to some degree?
Sure. So I charge anywhere between 1 and 3 months worth of nursing home expense. So whatever your client is paying per month in nursing home bill, particularly when they hire you, if you can prove how much you're saving them, and that's one of the, in my coaching, we spend quite a bit of time on how to present this to clients to say, you know, like in my area, nursing homes are about $7,000 a month. I rarely charge over 15. So I can tell them, look, 2 months worth of nursing home, you know, by hiring me, if you don't hire me, you're going to spend 38 months. You're going to pay for 38 months in the nursing home. By hiring me, I'm going to cut this down to the first of next month. So you'll pay for this month and that'll be it. And so for saving you 38 months, pay me 2 months and we'll call it even. They're like, yeah, gladly. To save 38 to pay you 2, absolutely, I'll do that. And so even if, and I get kind of squirmish, and this is funny that you bring this up because I'm about to complain to my state bar about an attorney and what they are charging for this. Okay, that's a whole different story, but don't go nuts on it. But show your value. I will not touch a Medicaid application for less than $7,500. Okay, just because I know the time involved. I know how much work there is in it. I won't touch one for less than 7,500. I generally charge, if I'm doing some planning, and particularly if I'm doing an annuity, I'll charge probably $10,000 or $15,000. I've gone up to like 18 before on big cases, but you can sell this very easily if you relate it to the amount of months that you're saving them. And so generally somewhere in the guidelines of 2 or 3 months or 1 to 2, maybe 3 months worth of nursing home, you can justify that and clients will gladly pay that.
Okay, this is a follow-up to the question you just answered. What if a
Okay.
Medicaid applicant needs nothing but the application and spending in a month? No trust, no note, no
Sure.
nothing. I can't charge a month of stay when I'm just doing the application. Will the nursing home handle these types of applications?
Yeah, the answer typically is yes. Now, don't sell yourself short, okay? It's amazing, particularly if the family's there. People are generally scared of the government, okay? They want someone on their side when they are facing the government. And I will, even though someone doesn't need anything but the application, it is still a process. You still have to know the rules. You have to know this process, and doing this for them is worth something. And so that's why I will tell families, look, you're probably not going to hire me because you, the applicant, don't have $7,500. But I'm just saying, if you want me to do this for you, I charge $7,500. Probably 20 to 25% of the time, the family will say, I'll pay it. So a son or someone else will pay you. Put that in writing. Let everybody understand. Follow your ethical rules to say someone else is paying this, but my focus is on this person and their application. But you'll be surprised at family members who will say, "Hey, you seem to know what you're doing. You can handle the government. We don't know anything. I'll pay you to do this application." And so just pick a fee, stick to it, present it. Like I said, 75 or 80% of the time, they're like, boy, that's a lot of money. No thanks. I'll get the nursing home to do it. Sure, I understand that. I'm not offended, but you'll be surprised. If you never ask, the answer is always no. So I tell almost everyone, you probably don't want to do this, but if you want me to do the application, I'll do it for $7,500. And I'm surprised when people are like, okay, I'll pay it. Okay, let's go. So don't sell yourself short. People will pay for you to take on the government for them.
Okay, we have a couple more questions here.
Okay.
This one is asking, when you have an income producing real estate that's exempt as an asset, since it's income producing, what steps, if any, do you take to prevent estate recovery on the real property?
Well, that's a very state specific problem. And that's one of the issues that I don't like to do that. All of the income goes to the nursing home because it's their income. And particularly if this is like a rental, someone's living there and the heat and air go out, who's going to pay for the new heat and air system? Because all this money goes to the nursing home. There is no money to pay for this. And you run the risk of estate recovery at the end. I will tell you personally, I work with the families to say, look, here's the problems with this. All the income goes to the nursing home, and the state can come back and put a lien on this at the time of this person's death. I recommend let's do something with it. Let's give it to the kids, work through that penalty divisor and half a loaf basically to get this out of their name. Let's take care of it so that it's not subject to estate recovery and the income can go somewhere else and we don't have to worry about it. But sometimes they don't want to do that. A lot of times if it's not their home, you can't protect it from estate recovery usually, but that is based on state law. My recommendation is do something with it, get it gone, get rid of it.
Okay. And then any idea what happens in an income cap state where a bank will not open a QIT account based on misreading of the POA, but the Medicaid office is requiring one, even though the applicant is below the income limit? I cannot get another bank to open a QIT account based on the fact that the client does not have an account there.
Well, yeah, I do know if Regions Bank is in your area, they will not do a Miller Trust. It's frustrating. But so they said that their income is under the limit. If it's under the limit, you don't need a Miller Trust. But
Yeah.
assuming that it is over the limit, I just go to a different bank. I mean, open up another account at a different bank. You've got to get that open somewhere. And so there are some banks out there that will do it. Sometimes you've got to go sit down. What happens is when they see a trust, a Miller Trust, they're like, oh, we're going to send you to the trust department, and that's just a huge nightmare. It's like, no, 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 no. This is just a checking account. It happens to be named a trust. Just open up a stinking checking account for us. And so there's a bank somewhere that should do it. If not, I mean, that could be one of your hardship arguments. It's like, no one will do this, but you've got to get it in writing and prove it. And I would not feel comfortable making that argument, because some bank out there will open up a Miller Trust. You may have to change all of their banking to that bank, but you got to get this done.
Okay, and then I'm gonna make myself the presenter, Todd. We had some questions and confusion from attorneys that are in states that don't do the minimum maximum calculation for determining the community spouse resource allowance. So hopefully you guys can see my screen now, and all of the states that are in orange on our screen does not do the minimum maximum dividing the assets in half as of the snapshot date. They just let the community spouse keep the maximum of 137,000, except for Illinois, which is a little bit different at 109,000. But I wanted to clarify that because some people were super confused about the math that you were doing, and just wanted to put a note out there that some states you don't have to do that calculation.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, I think that we answered all of the questions. I know we ran over a little bit on time. If anybody has any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to Todd or myself. I think both of our contact information was listed on the previous slide. And again, Todd's going to be presenting next month on the fair hearing process and what happens if you get a denial. And I don't think there's anything else to add. I think that next webinar is going to be on August 17th. And I want to thank everybody for their time today. Thank you, Todd. The presentation was great. And if anybody has any questions, let us know.
All right. Thank you.